Donald Trump is escalating his attacks. I don't even want to call it escalating because we've always kind of known what this is about. But his attacks on the Smithsonian Institution and one specific crucial part of American history. On Truth Social this week, he wrote in part, quote, the Smithsonian is out of control, where everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Following that post, the White House spokesperson Lindsay Halligan went on Fox News to echo Trump's criticism, claiming that the Smithsonian has a, quote, overemphasis, end quote, on slavery. What she did not mention is that American slavery spanned 250 years if you count it conservatively, and that its legacy continues to shape our society today, both good and bad. Then on Thursday, the White House doubled down, or I guess tripled down, in a press release titled, quote, President Trump is right about the Smithsonian. The administration laid out a list of exhibits and programs that it deems problematic. Among them, artwork honoring children and pregnant women thrown overboard during the Middle Passage. A series on how to be anti-racist, exhibits on LGBTQ plus history, programs highlighting Latinos and Latinas with disabilities, and the list goes on. In other words, efforts designed to educate, to reflect culture, and to broaden our understanding of the American story are now being targeted for erasure, literally, by the White House. The American Alliance of Museums issued a warning last week, quote, we call on all who value our shared heritage to support the museum field in resisting censorship so museums can continue to educate, connect, and inspire. America needs museums and the professionals who steward them. They educate, connect, and help us understand one another, something we cannot afford to lose, end quote. I'm joined now by two longtime friends of the show, Eddie Glaude, Distinguished Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University and author of many important books, including We Are the Leaders We Have Been Looking For, and Professor Imani Perry, Professor of African American Studies at Harvard University and author of many equally important books, including Black in Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People. Welcome to you, friends. Thank you for being with us. Professor Perry, like no one needs to be surprised about any of this, right? When we start attacking universities or we start attacking authors or professors or journalists, you kind of know where this is going, right? People who lean into the good and bad parts of American history. That said, the Smithsonian is a federally funded institution, and many of the world's finest museums are institutions that receive the backing financially of the public, of the taxpayer, and of the federal government. So it almost seems worse to me that this is starting at the Smithsonian.
Oh, absolutely. It seems worse. I think it is that it's starting at the Smithsonian. They're federally funded institutions and they are free. And so there's this incredibly beautiful democratic process. We think about people come to the museum from every walk of life and they get access to these extraordinary troves of information that have been put together through diligent historical research, through museum educators, through history, sociology, cultural studies. There's this long process, and people are able to be present together to learn history, to learn the narrative of this country that is deeply inclusive. I think that's part of what the transformation, in particular of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, has demonstrated. Remember when it first opened, there were throngs of people. You could barely get in. This unbelievable excitement to gather knowledge through a particular perspective, but not a crudely ideological one, their particular history of a people. And that was an indication that Americans and also visitors to this country really wanted to know. And so it's yet another example of this attack on knowledge, an attack on knowledge that is deeply democratic and therefore an attack on democracy itself.
And that's a line it's a thread I want to pull on in a moment. But Professor Glaude, one thing the reason I wanted to talk to the two of you is that because we have set a basis of how we get information about bad times in our history like slavery, people like you and Professor Perry can write about thinner slices of our history, and people can be allowed to go deeper in your explorations of what's going on in history. Because if we really just didn't understand the broad strokes of slavery, we'd never be able to get to where we are today with some of the remarkable influences and outcomes of it. This is dangerous, given the precipitous moment we're at in America. It's dangerous for us to be doing things that stand to make us perhaps a little more ignorant than we already are.
Well, absolutely, Ali. First of all, it's great to see you and great to see Professor Perry. I think if we understand the underlying ideological motivation behind what Donald Trump and his ilk are doing, is doing, we will get a sense that this is in some ways a white nationalist project that we have seen before in another form. We think about the lost cause, when we think about the ways in which slavery was rendered within the context of the lost cause, when we think about how Reconstruction was imagined or reimagined or deconstructed in order to allow the South to view itself in a particular sort of way, how history became heritage. And then if we widen the aperture just a bit, we understand that what Donald Trump is trying to do, right, is in some ways devalue diversity. Right. He wants to reject the idea that ours is a more perfect union, that we still have a ways to go. He wants to hold the view that, how can I put this, Allie, that victory was secured in the founding, that we're not engaged in this road to perfection, that everything was settled with the revolution. And so he wants a story that actually reflects that, because in some ways he thinks that's the basis of cohesiveness, a sense of consensus that he thinks diversity threatens. So we have to see this as a deeply white nationalist project that has an assault on history at its center, I think.
And I remind people that Donald Trump's reaction to the 1619 project was the 1776 project, right? The idea that history started and important parts of it ended with that. Professor Perry, here's the danger. Donald Trump is doing to the Smithsonian what he's doing in D.C. by bringing in troops and ICE agents. He can because there's no one to fight. He doesn't have a governor. He can't go to private museums and say this sort of thing. But it does start to put a chill, because lots of private museums, like private universities, get government funding for certain things. And at some point, he's just creating a world in which, do you have the energy to fight with Donald Trump or do you not? Which means this will start to trickle down to other museums and schools and libraries. It's already working in the book banning world. How do you stop this? How do you fight this at this point where museums and universities and professors and journalists and teachers and authors all say, no, you don't get to dictate or change our history?
I mean, I think it's going to require a complex strategy. I don't have a simple answer, but what I do know is that it's essential to continue to insist upon going to the institutions, reading the books, telling the truth in every form possible. These institutions need our support. Our communities need our support as well. And so it's a challenging task, but I almost think that it is it's essential to continue to commit to the value that such public institutions, that the public sector represents, to not allow the fear of this moment to debilitate us to the extent that we become passive participants in this destruction.
And yet, there's some artfulness to what Donald Trump does, right? He targets not just universities, because most universities are actually run by middle of the road conservative men. He targets elite universities. He targets diversity. He targets museums, which are meant to be accessible to everybody, but actually a lot of people don't get to go to the Smithsonian Museum. He does these things, Eddie, that make it feel like this isn't actually part of your life. We're just cleaning things up on the side.
Right, and we have to understand this part of his culture war, right? These are sites, places where so-called radical left-wing people thrive, educated elites. These are the folk who look down upon his people, the true Americans, as it were. So we need to understand it as part of this kind of ideological battle that he's waging. But, Allie, I want to personalize this for a moment. There's a way in which he attacks American history. It's too woke for him. Mm-hmm. Slavery wasn't, always talking about bad slavery, as it were, the badness of slavery. It takes us to the heart of our history, my history. Mm-hmm. I'm in Mississippi right now. Al. What does it mean to tell the story of Mississippi in the way that Donald Trump is trying to tell it? Why is it the case that our history, the history that makes me and Professor Perry who we are, she's from Alabama, what does it mean for this man to say that our story that makes us possible is woke, that it ought to be dismissed, that it shouldn't be told in history, in museums and the like? It's an all-out assault on what made my mom and dad and their grandparents possible. And these are folk who actually lived, Allie, through Jim Crow. What does it mean for this man to assault, to attack it, to claim it as somehow reverse racism? So there's the broad ideological question that we're grappling with, the question of history and the like, but then there's the personal dimension. Why is it the case that whenever these people attack wokeness, they attack our story? And I think we have to begin to express that outrage, Ali, very clearly.
Yeah, and I knew you two were the perfect two to have this, or at least start this conversation with, so I'm always deeply appreciative of the time that you take to help us analyze these things. Professor Eddie Glaude, Distinguished Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, and Imani Perry, Professor of African American Studies at Harvard University.